Hi, everybody. I believe you can all see me and hear me. I'm looking at the comments to make sure that everything looks good. Yep, let's do this. Hi, everyone. Thanks for taking your time to learn more about Project IDX. I think for many of you, this is probably Saturday evening, but for others around the world, it might be different times. But either way, thanks for taking some time to learn more about how to make your development lives easier. And so my name is Kirupa. I'm a product lead at Google working on Project IDX. So as a quick agenda, not a very complicated session. I'm going to be talking at a very high level about starting with who I am, learn a little bit Project IDX from almost a 20,000-foot bird's eye level. Then I'm going to dive into a little bit on the history of Project IDX. Why did we create it? What was the going on in technology that made us want to invest in another web-based cloud development environment? And then I'll dive into a little bit on Project IDX itself. What makes it interesting. I'll give you all a quick demo. And already from seeing some of the comments there's a lot of questions that many of you may have. And there's also a lot of you here. So we figured the best way to do a Q&A session that is answer some of your top questions and then have ways of following up with you all afterwards. So let's get the quick part out of the way. Who am I? My name is Krupa again, and I've always had a few hobbies, for most of my life. Web development, developer tooling were things that I was always interested in. And later on, I got into product management as well. And this led me to majoring in computer science and electrical engineering. And I went to Microsoft, Salesforce, and now Google to work essentially on combinations of web development problems, developer tooling problems, and the intersection of both in some cases as well. And you can find me at Kirupa on Twitter X, where I pretty much talk a lot about those three topics. If you want to hear more about that, definitely check out my content. Now, let's talk about the reason why you're all here, which is Project IDX. So I'm going to start by giving you a very quick introduction to Project IDX, and then I'll go deeper into it later on. So the TLDR is this. Project IDX is a full stack app development environment. It's cloud hosted, runs in your browser. It has AI assistance infused throughout all of it. So as you're doing your app development work, you'll find that our AI assistant will be helping you throughout various parts of your journey. And the last thing is that, again, it's in your browser, no setup required. And our goal really is for you to be able to build your apps on any device from anywhere. And that's really something we hold very close as a P0 in our development. And if you take a look at what IDX is, I know that one of the calls to action for you all was to create an account on IDX at google.com. And I believe some of you may already be playing with it for the past couple of weeks. But at a very high level, when you look at IDX, it should look very familiar to you. If you've used other developer environments or other code editors, you should see a lot of things that are familiar, some things that are more unique, and I'll dive into those in a little bit. But the big one is that it's built on Code OSS, which is the same underlying infrastructure that powers Visual Studio Code. So a lot of the familiarity, keyboard shortcuts, and ecosystem that you might be excited about continues and carries forward in IDX as well. It's web-based. You can run it in your browser as a URL. You can install it locally on your machine as a progressive web app, PWA. So you have a couple of options here on how you want to use it, but the idea is for it to be easily accessible on any device as long as you have a modern web browser. It's a full cloud VM. So a lot of the work that's being done is done on a dedicated machine that gives you access to a terminal, file system, and a lot of the things that you might want to expect from a developer environment. So the idea really is if you can do things locally on your machine, we should be able to replicate that, and you should be able to replicate that in the cloud-based environment of IDX as well, with almost little to no modification to your existing workflow. We give you pre-configured environments. So you get common starting points where you can start from things that we think are great places to build mobile apps, front-end app for web, backend, and on the full range of options in between. Or we can also create our own custom environment, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit as well. It's also designed for collaboration. You can share workspace with your friends, with your colleagues, and then be able to make edits on your code and have others be able to see it and collaborate with you in almost the same way as someone might be able to do if they were to pull up a chair, sit next to you, and start playing with your keyboard and mouse and be able to work on your screen at the same time. We also emphasize very heavily on providing you with solutions. I call them integrated pathways for many common tasks. Do you want to deploy your website? Do you want to deal with secrets, key value pairs? Do you want to be able to add APIs for various services? We make it very easy for you so you don't have to jump between tabs, go to Stack Overflow, copy and paste answers, and things like that. We try to integrate as much of it as you can so you can stay focused, stay in the flow of your development. And the probably one of the coolest things that I enjoy is live previews. We give you a real device emulator for Android. We give you various iframes for being able to test your web apps in regards to various fidelities. And we give you API testing. We give you a lot of things depending on what you're building. You get a nice way of previewing it in real time, so that way you can see that what you're building is doing the right thing. And of course, a common theme you're going to see is AI assistants. We do think that as AI assistants get more and more, more powerful, and especially as they're more and more understanding of the code you're building, your productivity and your ability to be able to create the kinds of apps that you want will become much, much easier and be more productive. And we'll talk a little more about that as well. And so that was the bird's eye view of what Project IDX is. And so now what I want to do, though, is take a step back and talk about what motivated us to and explore building Project IDX, and why we think we have a really compelling solution that hopefully you all find very interesting and useful as well. And so I'm going to start by talking about how app building has changed. For most of us, the way we build apps today is time consuming, it's frustrating, and it's not as easy as it used to be. There's a lot of friction and hoops that we need to jump through to get even the most basic of applications up and running. And this is not how it always used to be. This is something that has slowly accumulated over time. And as all of the compounding effects happen, it started off slowly, and that all that slow growth ended up becoming more and more unbearable as we get to present times. And my favorite example always to talk about the world's first web page. As many of you know, Tim Berners-Lee was one of the creators of the internet and HTML and a lot of the underlying technologies we rely on today. And this is his first website. Notice that it is pretty much plain text. The URL is not like a very nice domain name. It's just his laboratory, and then all the paths in the server that led you there. And you have various links. It's pretty plain. The font is probably the default font, might have been Times New Roman or whatever the equivalent was at that time, and then nothing, no styling, nothing beyond that. But fast forward just 10, 15 years from then, and the web pages that we're working with, the content we see, it's different. It's interactive. It's visual. There's a lot going on here. For example, here, my web page is, I'm using Google Maps here. It's using my GPS, physical hardware capability, tunnel through to my browser to be able to give me real-time information on location. And there are things we're doing, like what we're doing right now. I am talking to you in one part of the world. Many of you are in another part of the world, and the video and audio is almost streaming in real time. I didn't install anything. It's all being done through the browser. Rich audio, video APIs. That's a whole new level of things that people probably never imagined could be done using just a computer, using just the internet. And more recently, we've seen like traditional desktop applications like Adobe Photoshop being able to run fully in your browser thanks to WebAssembly and WebGPU and equivalent technologies that take very heavy-duty traditional languages and compile them to work really well in web-based solutions. Back in the day, this used to require, I think, like a bunch of physical CDs you had to insert and install and do things. Now I just go to a URL and I have the full power of a desktop application running fully in my browser as well. And all of these things take complexity. It's no longer as simple as just opening up a file in Notepad or WordPad or your favorite text editor of choice, writing a freelancer code and having it up and running. It requires a deep understanding of a lot of things, not just the technology, but the underlying frameworks. How does it get hosted? What does the infrastructure look like? How does it get deployed? It becomes a task in its own way. And I'm not just picking on web developers. I like to pick on web development because I'm more familiar with it. But back in the day, I'd learned how to, I had to learn C++ for my schooling. And back then, you had one tool, Visual Studio. I think it was Visual C++ 6, or Developer Studio in this case. And I had one language to write in. I had one button. And the way I installed it was just from a physical disk. There was no installation of anything. When I launched it, it would just run. And this is the output. There was no complication, no confusion. There was never a question about which of the many consoles might be the one that might come up, or which repository to go to install something. It was straightforward. And but compare that to today, where if you had to get started to even do hello world in your favorite framework or language, you have to probably pick and choose not just one of these favorite logos, probably a combination of them, and figure out how to get started. That it's very, very different. If you use a popular code editor, like here I am using Visual Studio Code, when you say, I want to get started doing something, you get a new file, the only option you get is you can start with a text file, and then you start writing things. There's no expectation or guidance on how do I actually go from what I want to build to how do I get there using the current tools that are available. So the technology has gotten very complicated. It became very difficult to build complicated apps or even simple apps, and the tooling wasn't really helping us too much either. And there's also, beyond just the technology changing, our behaviors have changed as well. And that has also made development more complex. A lot of us are more geographically distributed. It used to be that if you wanted to work on a project, if you had to work as a team on something, you were physically in the same location. You were probably just, either a room away or in the same desk, sharing a mouse and keyboard and pair programming. But that's no longer the case. We are all more geographically distributed. And the apps we're building are not just running on a desktop or a laptop or some kind of a large screen. They run on a variety of devices. You have your phones, you have your watches, you have other smart devices that are all capable now of not just connecting to the internet, but also having app stores and apps that can do interesting things that are optimized for what you're trying to do. And this is, as a developer, this is also very expensive. If you want to test your app across all of these surfaces, how are you going to be able to do that without making it a complicated activity? And so it's a pattern that I think that you all may be seeing from what I'm saying here. The things that should be easy, they're hard. And things that should be fast, they're slow. Development is no longer just I launch an app, type in my code, hit compile, everything works. And things should be cheap, like testing and being able to just make my app work, are more expensive than ever before. But what hasn't changed, of course, is the core workflow of how developers ultimately build apps. A common visualization you'll see is this infinity diagram where you have a cycle that starts with coding, building, testing, and then the outer loop, which is the releasing, monitoring, operating, and that all feeds into creating this infinite cycle of how we can simplify software development. And all stages of this, which has not changed, are now more complicated and more broken, in my opinion, than ever before. And that's why we built Project IDX. We want to take a step back and say there has to be a better way. Building apps used to be not this complicated. Can we bring some of that magic back so that app development is not just more approachable for all levels of developers, but existing developers as well can find improvements we're making to help them be more productive in the tasks that they're doing. So Project IDX, if I had to describe it in more formal detail, is a browser-based development workspace, and it aims to use AI assistants to simplify two things: full stack, not just your UI, not just the backend, but all the layers in between, and multi-platform app development. You'll see that one of the big areas we're investing in is not just targeting web development, but we also are focusing heavily on mobile development, React, Flutter Native, and soon in the future, Android Studio, as well as being able to do work on the backends as well, and then any other areas that might come up that are emerging technologies. And so I'm going to go through like about 8 or 9 of the I think the marquee features that make IDX really an interesting place. So first of all, get up and running quickly. One of the things that we really want to do is that in a matter of seconds, you should be able to go from launching IDX to having something you're trying out that you can quickly see working and get the validation that, yep, you're on the right path here. So whether you're creating a new project, and I'll talk about all the templates that we provide in a moment, or you're importing a project from a Git-based repo, it could be GitHub, could be GitLab, or Bitbucket, we will make sure the right environment is created for you and have you up and running to be able to start your development without a whole lot of mess. And of course, remember, it's all browser-based, so no setup required, no configure information. So if you're on a Chromebook or an iPad or in any other kind of device that is not traditionally used for development, as long as you have an internet connection and a web browser, you should be able to use IDX. And in terms of starting points, we are very receptive to feedback, and we go across the community, and a lot of you have given us feedback as well on what are some starting points that you'd like to see. And so here's just a sample of all the various starting points that you might, find in IDX that can, help you get up and running. A lot of the popular ones are there, like a lot of your popular web frameworks, some of the multi-platform frameworks. I talked about React Native and Flutter and Android Studio in the future, and also a lot of the backend technologies as well, from Go and Java and Postgres for your databases and so on, and combinations of them as well. And so this is a great place for you to kind of start exploring if you have any interest in any of these areas. And of course, we also just give you a blank workspace where you don't have anything pre-configured by us. It's up to you to pick and choose your own journey and your own story in many ways that you want to configure and run with. So you have that flexibility as well. And I just mentioned a few moments ago, and this is an announcement we also made at various key moments in Google's I/O announcements in the previous conferences. We are actively soliciting feedback on Android Studio running inside IDX. It's a waitlist right now, so I'll share some links with it later on, but you can click on the link, join the waitlist, and be the first to be notified of when we have this capability available as well. So a part of what makes it possible for us to give you all these starting points and also make it easy for you to create own custom starting points is that foundationally, we give you customizable dev environments that are based on Nix, an extensibility framework for making server-side, or not server-side, but your developer environment configurations. And so what this allows us to do is, whether you're building your own custom environment for yourself or for your team, you have a lot of flexibility in specifying exactly what goes in your machine itself, what dependencies are there, what's your build tool look like, what is the tool chain that ultimately needs to be preserved. And that gives you a lot of power in being able to, in many ways, not just replicate what you can do locally on your machine, but hopefully go further, because now you're no longer tethered by what your machine is capable of. You now have a powerful cloud-based VM that you can do a lot more things with. And what you can often see now is that if you go to GitHub, you go to various projects, you'll see a lot of individuals actually helping extend IDX by providing their own starting point. So someone on our forums has a question about fast API, and very quickly another contributor posted a link to a GitHub repo, an open IDX button that uses the exact extensibility model. So you have this flexibility of being able to not just rely on things that we provide or that you create, but also rely on an ecosystem of I'm going to say extensibility experts who also provide solutions in so many ways. Now, of course, the next big one is just our AI assistants, and we have various degrees of AI that we provide in various flavors. So one of my favorite ones is AI Code Chat, where this is probably the most familiar to many of you who've been exploring AI assistants over the past, I'm going to say past year or two, where you have a chat-based interface. You can ask, you ask the chatbot a question, and it gives you back information. In our case, our chatbot is fully integrated inside IDX itself. So you can ask it questions to generate code, transform code, explain the code that you want, and it uses the context of your current file. And so you get more actionable feedback as well. So it doesn't just give you answers from this large body of information it has, it actually tunes it more for what you're doing specifically in your project. So you get something that's more relevant in many cases. And if you're not going to be using chat, or to go in addition to chat, we also give you AI code generation and a lot of related enhancements around it. So while you are writing your code, you can interact with the AI assistant to be able to perform common tasks. And in this animated visual right here, I'm specifying adding comments as part of what needs to be done. But you can also do a lot more activities and have it do direct action, like refactor your code, add a copyright statement at the top, or whatever you think that an AI assistant needs to help you with. And here's a few more variations of what we recently released called interactive chat, where not only can you chat and have static information back, you can actually get actionable things done as well. So for example, in this case, I want to run a terminal command. I can just click on this button and they'll run the command on my behalf. Or I can update a file. It'll update the file for me without me having to copy and paste information back. And we're constantly exploring new ways of how we can use AI to help you all be more productive. So if you have any feedback on things that we can do differently, or new ideas on things we should do, feel free to share it with me. I'd be happy to take it back to the team, and we'll explore new ways of using AI here. One of the things I talked about earlier is that we give you what I like to call integrated solutions, common pathways, because when you're building an app, it's no longer just about what you know as a developer. It's often a case of bringing in services and APIs and extending your app with capabilities built by other developers, other companies, other teams. And so we have been exploring new ways of making that part easier, because the traditional way is let's say, for example, I want to, I think here I have an example of like, Google Maps platform. I want to add Google Maps to my, my app. I want to maybe add some location awareness. In the old world, the way I'd have had to do this would have been I go to whatever the console page needs to be for Google Maps. I sign in, authenticate, I enable an API, get an API key, copy it, come back into IDX or my code editor, paste it, and then I'm good to go. We want to take a step back and said, what if we didn't have you do all those steps? What if we you already signed into IDX. We already have a pretty good understanding of what you are and what your account is capable of. What if we brought all those things in-house? What if we just made it a few clicks as opposed to many dozens of clicks? And that's one of the areas we're exploring with our integrated solutions, where we really want to bring common developer activities directly to your fingertips with a streamlined, intuitive user experience. So no switching tabs, no digging through documentation, no using code. And with our AI assistants, you have a nice way of being able to uncover any questions you might have or answers to your questions without having to do a lot of the traditional go to Google, go to Stack Overflow, copy and paste, and see what works and doesn't work. And we also give you live interactive previews. And here's a more detailed version of it. Here, I think this is me using, creating a React Native app where I have an Android emulator that's now running in the browser, so I can see my application running in real time. Depending on the kind of project you're working on, whether it's a web project or it's a console-based API, or it's an actual API gateway itself, the appropriate preview surface will be created automatically for you. And if it's not, you are all, if you want to customize it for yourself, the Nix-based environment we provide allows you to do all of that as well. And as some of the last things we want to talk about is easy workspace sharing. One of the things that I always enjoy is I often run into problems when I'm doing something and I just share it with my colleague and just have them look at my code directly, which I think is a significant step up over going to a chat, copying and pasting a snippet of code and asking someone for help. This allows them to go directly into my environment, see exactly what's going on. Great for debugging, if anything is broken, but also great for just exploring and jointly building something that works really well. And so to get started, I think a lot of you already have the URL. It's go to idx.dev. This is our homepage where you can not only sign in to use IDX, but you can also check out our blog, check out our documentation, and learn how to get support, and just learn more about some of the things I talked about in, I think, a nicer, more visual way. And of course, if you have any questions at any point in time, we also have our forums. It's one of the great places to go where you and others can get help from both, not just the IDX team, but also from others in the community who are actively using IDX as well as community.idx.dev. And so now what I'm going to do is just go into IDX itself and give you all a very quick overview of just some of the things that you can do in it. And then, I'll turn it over to some, Q&A and some questions that you might have that, that came up during the talk we might have already had before. So here I'm in idx.dev. Let me zoom in a bit so everything's a little bit bigger. I might zoom in and out, by the way, depending on which part of the app I'm in. So I'm going to click on Explore IDX. Actually, no, get started. And in a few moments, I've already signed in. I've already created my account. So I'm already seeing the main landing page for IDX. And what you'll see here is that I can see not just I created a few projects, over the past couple of days. So all of those are listed right here. And I can import a repository if I need to. So if I have an existing repo of content that I want to work on, I can go and paste it here and be able to, continue. But the area that's, I think, probably going to be most exciting for many of you who are probably using IDX for the first time is to see all the starting points that we give, all the templates that we provide. So I have see all templates. It's a link. I click it. And now what you can see is that there's a categorized listing of the most popular templates you can get started with. Right now, web app is selected, so you can see all the popular web app starting points. So it's Angular, Next.js, Astro, React, simple HTML. Nothing, no frills, nothing fancy there. Just a plain document with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Svelte, an underlying, build system, and Vite, and a lot of the very common starting points. Similarly, for backend, we give you multiple, areas: Go, Python, Flask. Mobile has Flutter, React Native. For AI ML, we have a handful of project types, using Firebase GenKit, LangChain, and all of them using Gemini API as well. Databases, we have a few examples that you can use to get started with actually building apps that talk to a database, and a handful of areas like miscellaneous has blank workspace. So if you really want to work in an area where you have no training wheels, no guidance, and you're going to start and customize everything from the ground up, this is the place you want to ultimately start. But all of these starting points, regardless, depending on what you're interested in, will get you up and running using the actual tool chain of that environment itself. So for Angular, you'll see the ng CLI being used behind the scenes for all the work. For Next.js, similarly, appropriate npm packages and tools are being used. And that gives you a great environment to be able to not just use IDX for what you're doing, but also follow the official documentation from your respective framework or technology of choice. And so here I have a project that I created earlier where a repository of just little examples that I like to create and just try things out. And you can see that I'm a code editor. I can make a lot of changes that I want to. I can bring up the chat. There are multiple ways to bring up chat. I mean, the AI chat. I can click on the appropriate icon. And here, for example, I asked a question, explain this project to me. But then one thing I can also do is that, what language is this project written in? I mean, this is a very simple one. I already know what language it's written in, but just to give you a taste of what our AI assistant does, this project written in, hit enter. It'll take a few moments, and you'll see that it's written in these following languages. And I can also make some changes as well. For example, if this block of code, let me add some comments to it. So I'm going to add a question here. Add a comment. Yeah. Add comments. And you can see that now I'm actually going to be able to specify some information here. And here's the before and after. And yeah, let's go ahead. Let's go with this. Accept. Yep. Okay, there's a slight error there, and live demos and all of that, but it works, and hopefully when you all trying it out, it works really well also. And I can also see a live preview of what's going on here. So for example, let's say I want to change what's happening right here. Is a random walk example. I can change it from, let's say, red to make it green, and make the size of it 10. Let me refresh it. You can now see that appropriately everything is updated in real time as well. Now, the main goal we had with IDX is that we often have a phrase that we use, both at a lot of the teams that we at Google, but in IDX specifically, is we want to meet developers where they are. And so a lot of what you're seeing here, a lot of what you should be able to explore should feel very familiar and natural to you. And in areas where we think we can do better, we've provided those integrations for you. Like here's our collection of solutions that you can use to make common activities more easy. If you run npm packages, you have all the backend ports are available. Our documentation goes into more of it, but my hunch is that if you've done any development, more of IDX is more familiar to you and just naturally feels at home than it does feel as something that's brand new. So the best way to learn about IDX is to go to our homepage, pick a template that you want to build for whatever project. And I believe you all have a project that you all have been asked to build over the next couple of weeks. Either use an existing one or start from a point that uses language that you're familiar with or you want to learn more about, and then just go from there. And so that should be an easy way to not just learn about IDX, but more importantly, build something that you're proud of that you can then share and submit as part of your assignments here. And so with that, I want to take a break and answer questions that you all may have. That this is like the formal part of like what is IDX, why it's important, what makes it cool, and how you can use it to help make your life infinitely easier building applications. So hopefully some of the challenges of app development that we've kind of accumulated as an industry over the past many decades are now not something we need to worry about, and IDX is going to help simplify that and move it back to a point where just building stuff is fun. Why can't we just get back to that? So let's get back to the questions. And I think Pranav will be sharing some questions with me. If not, I will look at the live stream on YouTube and see what I can quickly get. I know you're all chatting quite actively here. So let's see. Okay, from Kaushik, how can AI-powered workspaces help in design and user experience phases of app development? That's a very good question. One of the things that you can do right now is ask it questions on how do I center an element, or how do I draw something that has a logo on the top left side and then something on the right-hand side, and things like that. One of the things that we're exploring, something we haven't released yet, but we will be hopefully talking more about in the upcoming weeks, is that we're also working on you being able to just visually draw the UI that you want, or upload an image of what you want, and have the AI assistant give you a feedback on how you can actually turn that visual or turn something like that into code that actually works. So that's an area that we're actively exploring, and we will hopefully have something to share with you soon that answers that one directly with shipping code. Whenever I try to log in using my Gmail ID, not able to log in because Project IDX can't load because third-party cookies are disabled. Yes, this is something that we're working on actively, in resolving. But in the short term, you have to go into your settings in Chrome. I think our documentation walks you through it on the few tabs and a few toggles you need to set to enable third-party cookies. And once you do that, you'll be able to use IDX. It's a quirk of how we're currently built, and we're actively working on reducing that quirk. Is there C++ present? Yes, there is C++ present. If I go to, let me try to search. Yep, C++. So build an API server with C++, test. This will take a few moments to create. I'm on a developer build right now, so things aren't cached 100%, but C++ should be building. It's available, and we can continue asking other questions while it's going on. How can I contribute to the development of IDX? That's a great question. The best way right now is to use our Nix extensibility model and just share templates and share solutions that you've created with the broader community. Right now, the way we're focusing a lot of our efforts is on making it easier for all of you to, we build the foundations, but then you build the rest to make it, do all the interesting things. And an example of what I mean by dev.nix is that, right now the C++ project has loaded. I'm going to open this dev.nix file. And here you can see exactly how this project was created. You can see that the packages Docker, Docker Compose, and then these particular extensions are what help bring C++ capabilities into your environment. And there's a lot more things you can do. If you, for example, look at the equivalent dev.nix file for our React Native implementation or Flutter implementation, you can see it does a lot of customizations. And in the future, we really do want to highlight community contributions in templates and in starting points from individuals such as yourself, Jay. So we want to, make this an easier journey for all of you. Is IDX friendly for beginners? I like to think so, and I'd love to hear your feedback on it as well when you try it out. My hope is that it is as friendly as your favorite code editor that you're using today, but hopefully it is more friendly because we give you more opinionated starting points, and we also give you nicely integrated AI assistance throughout. So if you ever find yourself getting stuck or you're like, what do we do next? You have some guidance directly in the product itself to nudge you in the right direction, as opposed to you having to, what I like to call context switch, switch tabs, do things that are everywhere else. Great question, Parag. How can we implement the backend for the project? Will we be entitled to use Firebase only? We'll have freedom to choose anything we want. You have freedom to choose anything you want. One of the things we're doing right now is actually, you can have the common workflow you're going to see, especially in the forums you'll see people often talk about, is that they have a backend created in one workspace, and then they have another workspace where it's the front end, and they communicate between it. We're working right now on making public ports more easily accessible, but you can use a slight authentication method to be able to make that work. But your backend can be anywhere. You can integrate with any services, whether you feel like, for example, if you like AWS, if you like Azure, if you like Vercel, all those things are fully available for you to use. And so you're not tied to any one solution here. Again, meet developers where they are means that you're going to be building on all these areas. So can you share any case studies or examples of successful apps built using Project IDX? This is a great question. We don't have a full collection of case studies yet. We are working on them. Our marketing team is actually collecting feedback and on all these areas. In some of our blog posts from when we released IDX over the past few months, in terms of as we graduated from it being a private waitlist to now being available for anyone to use, we have had small examples of individuals who used IDX successfully. We try to create a more comprehensive guide at some point in the near future. Is this free of cost to use? Yes. Our goal really is to make sure that IDX is accessible to as many individuals as possible. Now, we are thinking of having versions of IDX that give you more capabilities, more things that you might have to, pay a little extra for. For example, if you want a more powerful VM, or if you want more advanced capabilities in some of the AI work that you're doing, they might fall under it, under a version which we are still exploring, but might have a cost associated with it. But for everything I've shown you right now, the idea really is that there should be no cost, no friction for you to use it. You just need a browser, Google account, and it should be up and running in a matter of moments. Is there a feature in Google IDX which helps us make interactive UI designs like the Figma spline does with our current requirement? Not yet, but it is something we're actively exploring. This goes back to an answer I gave to an individual earlier around what are some of the AI assistants that we're providing to make UI development easier. And so we're going to be sharing some things on this in the near future. These are great questions, by the way. Can AI-powered workspace interact with real-time data manipulation? Yes. The answer is yes. What you're running in IDX is a live version of your application. And so you can, if you have any kind of an API server that needs to process data in real time, you'll be able to do that as fast as your code and your network connection allows. And of course, there are probably better techniques you can use for caching and batching your operations. But at a very raw level, if you have a streaming API, that data just gets fed into IDX and you can start using it immediately to build your apps. We're not able to start making project in IDX now, what to do? I think there's probably a handful of things that could be going on. The easiest way is to, I think providing live tech support here might not be the easiest thing for me to do, but definitely post on our forums, community.idx.google.com. And I think, let me go back to that one right here. I'll show you what it looks like. So here you can basically be able to post your questions. It's very active. A large number of us are actively participating, and other IDX users around the world are participating as well. So any questions you might have, we'll be able to get through and answer very quickly. Which AI is available to the IDX environment? Is it only Gemini? Samia, yes, it is Gemini. Sandesh, is it secure for private data? Secure is a tricky one to answer because there are multiple levels of what considers secure. But the VM that you're using, it is assigned to your account. It's not shared with other individuals, so others can't access your VM unless you physically or explicitly share that VM with them. And we also integrate Cloud Secret Manager, so you can more securely store your anything like a key value pair API keys that's tied to specifically your account as well. And so yes, it is secure for, I'm going to say, 99% of all use cases. So I think it should be good. Can non-programmer make use of IDX? Not yet. I think there are things you can do in IDX that can, for example, if you're a non-programmer, you can open an existing project and ask our AI assistant to be able to explain the code to you, or be able to explain why is something being done. So it's a great way to learn. But I think to be able to build an app, we are not yet at the stage where if you're a non-developer, it's it's not a no-code or low-code tool yet in that sense. So being a developer, having a programming language or a framework or technology that you're excited about, starting IDX with that will probably be your best choice of being able to use it effectively. Bisru, can I use it for IoT? Can I use it for IoT development? I want to say yes. There are two parts to IoT development, of course. One is if I have a way of simulating the environment locally inside, let's say like a Linux VM container, then absolutely, you'll be able to do that. If you want to physically connect your IoT device to your machine and be able to do, have your development in IDX actually send data, serial data to, over a cable or some form to a physical device, there may be possibilities of doing that depending on what is supported. But that's an area where, definitely share in our forums, like what kind of things you're trying to solve in IoT. And then I or others can be able to help you out to see if that's possible or what workarounds are available. Jay, how can we use it with Android Studio? We'll be sharing more details on how that works. I think there's a video we teased at IO Connect in Bengaluru a few weeks ago on how this works. The idea really is that the Android Studio that you've always used in desktop will now be available in your browser for you to use via IDX. There's one question I see here. Is there a chance that IDX will ever come up as an app for end users? That's something we're actively thinking about as well. Right now, it is a progressive web app, so you can actually install it and get an icon on your toolbar or start menu, and then also be able to have the windowing that a progressive web app provides. So not the tabs, but the more traditional windowing interface. But we're still exploring what needs to be done there. So please feel free to share your feedback on what you're looking for in this. How can I start to work in IDX? The URL, I think, that's the call to action that was sent to you, I think, all via WhatsApp. Just go to idx.dev, click on get started, and then in a few moments after you sign in, you'll see the same landing screen that that I showed a second ago, where you get to have your starting point and be able to choose where you want to start with. Chan, how does Project IDX integrate with other cloud services and tools? It the short answer is it integrates pretty well. The reason is that when you sign into IDX, you're using a Google account ID to sign in. And that account ID carries with a lot of information about if you already have, let's say, an account on Firebase or an account on Google Cloud. We kind of already know who you are and what services are available for you to be able to easily use. So some of the authentication magic that typically is involved, that is no longer there. And so you're able to use it automatically behind the scenes as part of just building your app. And the solutions panel that I highlighted earlier can allow you to explore, like, for example, like the Maps integration or hosting on, let's say, Cloud Run or Firebase hosting. All those things are possible. Aryan, can Project IDX create app entirely on its own? Yes, you can. I'm interpreting two ways. Can the AI be able to create an app entirely that you haven't do anything? Maybe. It depends on the prompt you're using. It depends on how many follow-up prompts you have as well. You can probably build an app end to end using our AI assistant, completely. But if you are actually wanting to use IDX to build an app from beginning to end, yes, you can absolutely do that. My recommendation would be to, of course, commit to a repo so that your changes are always persisted. And that way you're able to share your changes, be able to have a more formal path for being able to make sure that you're not creating merge conflicts and then changing something that breaks you in an irreparable way. Because development, it happens. There's a question here on how do you actually push changes from IDX to a GitHub repo? Is it similar to VS Code? Yes, the answer is yes. You can either use the extension, you can use the terminal and be able to type in like just git push. You have all the same options available to you. Once you authenticate, with GitHub, we have the OAuth approach where you have to enter the 6-digit code. Your project and GitHub and the repo behind it are all fully in communication with each other. So the workflow you always had will work just fine. There's a question on, can I develop a game using Unity or any other 3D approaches? That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that, actually. I believe if there's a version of it that can be run inside the browser-based environment through the code OSS shell that we're using, then yes, you can you can use Nix to configure your environment to install, or you can install it after the fact, have the environment started up. But if it's an entirely new development environment beyond what IDX provides right now, maybe not. Hey, Rise, can Project IDX be used for robotics? Yes, actually, this goes back to the same as the IoT question. It depends on which robotics framework you're trying to do. A very popular one is the Lego Mindstorms version, which has both a client-based solution and, of course, one that gets deployed to an actual physical, hardware-based device. And so right now, depending on if it all can be run inside the browser and can be run inside the CodeOS environment, it should be working just fine. But if it requires more complicated communication between your machine and a physical device, I think there's some explorations we need to do here. Okay, how can I start if I don't know any language like Python or C++, etc.? I think it depends on what you want to build, and what language you are familiar with. If you want to learn any language of Python or C++, IDX is a great starting point. You can complement IDX as your code editor of choice while following documentation and tutorials on how to get up and running. But if you already have a language that you aren't familiar with, you can use IDX as a starting point for that as well. With our AI assistants, you do have the ability to complement your learning of any new language with it to be able to help you out. Pranav, can multiple users work in one project? Yes, they can. And that's part of the share workspace capability that allows you to add the individual email IDs of the people you want to collaborate with and have them also have access to your IDX workspace and be able to collaborate and be able to make changes and you be able to see them as well. Now, this is a very early exploration in our workspace sharing. There's a lot more we really want to do here to make it more refined. So you're going to see more and more improvements we're going to be making over the next couple of releases. Krishna Kumar, that's a great question. Can we select a specific version of a programming language for development? For some of our templates, yes, we do give you a version picker. For many, we do not. But what you can do, though, is if I go back to, let me see if I can go back to the project that I had created a few seconds ago. In the dev.nix file, there's often a version of everything that's being installed. There is often going to be a way for you to be able to specify the version for some of these packages or extensions if it is available. So you can actually specify the version there and have it work. And also you can toggle the version of the channel from Nix that all of the packages are coming from to go back to an earlier version as well. But for specifics, though, definitely post on our forums. We'll be able to help you out more directly and more with the more actionable information. You can probably just copy and paste in. About how to delete a workspace? Deleting workspace, that's pretty straightforward. If I just go back to google.com, I can, I can either bulk select workspaces or I can just select one that I created and just select delete from here. So I'm going to type in delete. And in a few seconds, that workspace will be forever lost. Is there a limit on the number of workspaces? Yes, Pranav, there is. When you first launch IDX, you have a limit of two workspaces, and then once you connect to developer profiles, which gives you access to the badge for being able to use IDX, you are then given 5 workspaces after that. Make simple app using Project IDX now for sample demo. I mean, that's a nerve-wracking question, but yeah, to start, Next.js is the proper starting point, and let's say it's JavaScript and live demo, and when I hit create. Now this is a bit of a cop-out answer because I'm not actually going to be building the code for it, but I will show that the code is already being created by, in this case, the project creation tools for Next.js, and that'll get the code up and running, and then you have the live preview up as well. And it'll take a few moments. So go to the next question, and I'll touch back on this as it comes up. Can we easily access IDX for college projects? If yes, then how would we? That's the same way you would access it in general by just going to idx.google.com and just signing up for an account and then being able to use that as your code editor of choice, as opposed to anything else that you might want. We give you REPLs, we give you support for Python and all the common languages that colleges often encourage students to learn. And so we can do that. Pranav, any tips or recommendations for getting an internship with Google? I do not have any direct tips on this one, but the official Google website for how to apply for being an intern and what are some of the resources available, they're going to be a best resource for all of this. And so, can IDX create app for Android and iOS? We can create it for Android. When it comes to Flutter and React Native, we have all the build tools built behind the scenes, so it's being able to make it all work appropriately, and so we get it fine. And so right now, the Next.js project is slowly being created, and I can now see that my files are available, start coding, start developing, I can do all the major changes. And it's currently also just running the initialization script. So you can see that I am getting everything up and running with all the right files in the right locations and so on. So I'll get back to that in a moment. Rahul, why my workspace is created showing load error? It's a bug that occasionally comes up. Do post in the forums if it keeps happening for you. We were actively investigating that right now. Actually, I can see comments from our team on it, so we're trying to figure out what's going on. But yeah, getting back to the example from earlier, here is my Next.js example working. I can see it. I can scroll down, I can click on links and play with it and debug and do all the various activities I'd want. So this is a very quick version of like a live demo in some ways, where you have something visual that appears that is entirely related to code that was written here. But you can imagine that going beyond what I had showed earlier, where I was doing like a random walk example, you can do more interesting things. Is there an autosave option in IDX? I think by default, a lot of changes you make should be made automatically. If not, there's a setting that you can specify that allows you to autosave. So it's something, it's not by default, you can specify it on a project basis. True. I didn't need any specific processor and memory. For the most part, no. You need to have just a machine that's capable of running a browser, a modern browser, and then also having an internet connection. And all the processing beyond that is run entirely on the VM itself. There may be cases where the actual preview here, for example, like this preview, is running locally on your machine. So if you're trying to do something extremely complicated, the preview will be running on whatever your machine is capable of. But if you're not focusing too much on the preview itself, but just purely on the core development workspace, and then the work on like compiling it and being able to show your workspace in general, you're not tied to any specific machine configuration. The idea really is that you should be able to use an old machine if you want, and yet build for very modern app development platforms. The question is IDX a programming language? No, IDX is not a programming language. It's just it's a collection of tools that we package in a nice end-to-end user-friendly way. Evil 089 is IDX open source. No, it is not. IDX is not fully open source, but a lot of the work that is more interesting here is available in GitHub in terms of our templates, which we are open sourcing, as we speak. I think our community templates are available right now. You can see a link to it in our forums. I mean, yeah. And then we're also in the process of putting all of our official templates open sourced as well. So you can actually play with a lot of starting points that we have, which is in many ways one of the more interesting differentiators that we have compared to many other developer environments that you might be using. For Node.js, can a script run 24/7 without keeping the web view working? That's a great question, Ali. And we're working on something that's going to help simplify some of this, where you can have the script running, but not for 24/7. The idea really is that, this is not a web server, API server in a traditional sense. It's really designed to help you get in, make your development work. And as long as you're doing your development, being able to actually continue that. But for being able to have the script run 24/7, a great option would be to just kind of deploy to Cloud Run, which is a great environment, or any other hosting provider or of choice that you have, and have that be the one that is actually being your API server. They have an endpoint that anything can ultimately connect to. We are working on making the IDX ports available in general, and that should make it easier for you to use during development. But we're not going to have it running 24/7 as well, though. So you just need to, keep that. There's two worlds: deployment and testing for all the time, but also for just doing your actual day-to-day coding task. In which case, IDX will be able to help you out. Aditi, does IDX help us in hosting our app? Yes, you can use the built-in hosting points we have, which is Firebase hosting, or also we can use Cloud Run, but you can also bring any other hosting provider you want as well. One of the things that is, we are integrated with the OpenVSX marketplace. And so we have a collection of extensions that the individuals who work on all of these solutions actually provide. So if you have a hosting provider that you're particularly, that you like, there's a very good chance to have an extension available. You can use that directly. Projecta, what is the full form of IDX? It's a mystery. It's an acronym we created. We don't really have it standing for anything in specifically. Are there any possibilities of IDX being available as an application instead of a browser-based platform? Beyond the progressive web app that we have right now, we haven't really gone too far in thinking about it, as being an application. So definitely, jump in our forums and explain more about what you would like to see if it is a standalone application. Is it just the offlineness of it, being able to use it without an internet connection, or other things that I need to know more about? So definitely do, ask on the forums, and be happy to learn more. Can a Flask app be hosted by using IDX? Yes, I believe so. And if I go to IDX at google.com, I do think we give you a Flask template. And if we don't, it's going to be there very soon. Oh yeah, here it is. Build a web backend with Flask in Python. So you can actually, create it. You can make it a web server or an API server. So web server gives you an HTML version that you can then deploy to a hosting provider, or it can be an API server, a backend gateway that you can use to make requests to and then process the input. How can we use AI code in Python? The AI solutions we provide are, the UX is common across all your language types. And so just create a Python project, use our, click on the icon or use a keyboard shortcut to bring up our AI assistant, and you should be up and running. Is the IJ project size the same as the other applications you'll be creating? Yes, we are, in many cases, for some of the new projects that we're creating, we're using the exact same starting point that are often the official documentation or the official tool chains for this frameworks create. The only delta is that we do create a small text file called dev.nix that contains information about how your environment was configured. And so the answer is yes, if you kind of squint a bit, but the answer is, is also no if you care about 1 kilobyte of extra metadata that might be coming along in your project for the ride. All right, so I think we've got a lot of questions answered, and if you have any more questions, of course, please do post in the forums at community.idx.dev. We'll be able to help answer more of this. But it was great chatting with you all, and hopefully you all have a chance to play with IDX. You learned some things from what I highlighted in some of the capabilities you provide. And I can't wait to see some of the projects that you all create. It's going to be a fun thing to play with as you all are developing it. So with that, thanks everyone. And I will hopefully see you all online in various other forums in the near future.